helplessness is your best friend, savage.
And do you find as well that it's not just affecting people's sex lives, but their idea about people and their personal sense of themselves as well?
Well, yes. First of all, many of the men are very disappointed by their own sexual performance because they think, they can keep up with the guys.
Trust me, I think most people are smart enough to know that pornography sex is a fantasy. And if you're dumb enough to believe that you're going to be like that, you'd have to work towards it.
In pornography, many of whom, by the way, have Viagra fortified penises, so there's that. The other thing that's really interesting when you speak to women is that their boyfriends are disappointed with how they look because they thought they were going to look like the women in pornography.
Trust me, if that's a big problem, then it's the problem with the two individuals, not your problem, nor is it society's problem.
They're disappointed with their responses because they thought they were going to have screaming orgasms like the women in pornography. And what also is interesting is, and I hear this from students across the country because I go lecturing across the United States of America and I hear the same stories over and over again, is their boyfriends want to play out porn sex on their body.
Now, I have no problem with two people wanting to emulate what they see on the television. Some people may experiment with their own sex life and that's their personal problems, not yours.
They want to do what they see, and women basically do not want these things to happen to them.
How the fuck do you know that? Do you miraculously have telekinetic powers and can read every person's mind all the time?
Now, increasingly, women are giving in. And let me give you an example, the perfect example of pornography. I've had hundreds and hundreds of students this past semester, and I have to say, and this is no exaggeration, that probably 90% of my students have absolutely no pubic hair whatsoever.
How the fuck do you know that? Are you going up to your students and asking them if they have pubic hair? Or are you physically spying on them? Or do you have or can you read their minds? Ugh, you're an idiot and you're gross.
They are fully waxed. This is completely from pornography.
Because as we all know, the only reason that people wax their bikini lines is because of pornography. And has nothing to do with health, hygiene, or alternate reasons.
Well, also, what about genital cosmetic surgery as well?
That's less so. But today, if you want one sign of the power of pornography, and I remember about 10, 15 years ago seeing that women in pornography had no pubic hair whatsoever, and I remember thinking,
oh, there's another idea. You actually having thought.
You're going to see this filter down. Yeah. And now it is everywhere. Everywhere. And I tell you, to such a degree that I recently was talking to a woman who's a nurse in Massachusetts who runs a program whose job it is to counsel adolescent girls who've been sexually abused. And she says in the last year, from one end of Massachusetts to the other, she has not seen any pubic hair on adolescent girls.
Well, I'm not wishing to be accused of trivializing sexual abuse, but what the fuck has that got to do with pornography? She is completely taking things out of context, and two, she could be easily making this shit up, and she has made shit up in the past before.
That's from one end of the country to the other. This is pornography. What my students tell me is many of their boyfriends or hookup partners, because there's more hookups going on now than dating, is that they won't have sex with them if they've got pubic hair, the boyfriends. It actually revolts them.
Yeah, again, she could be easily making this shit up, but let's hypothetical scenario. She is being serious. Why is it your problem? Or society's problem? It's the individual's problem.
It disgusts them because they're not used to it. Which, remember, means we have a generation of men being brought up on genitalia that look like children, not adult women.
Jesus Christ, that might be the most stupidest thing you've said today. And that's because what you're saying is that fundamentally the men like shaven havens because it reminds them of little girls. Jesus Christ, it's hard to make up what is stupider. That statement or the statement about people like interracial sex.
It is about the debasement of women. What better way to debase a white woman in the eyes of white men than to have her penetrated over and over again by that body which is the carrier of all that is demonised sexually, i.e. the black male. So it's one more way to dehumanize and demean her.
And I am somehow led to believe that she is morally right and morally just on her crusade against all that is pornography. Jesus Christ, she's a fucking idiot.
So can you talk about the general pornification of society as well? How does that play into all of this as well?
Well, when you look around you at the Britney Spears, Paris Hiltons, Lindsay Lohans of the world, and you look at how they're hypersexualized.
Nothing wrong with hypersexualization as long as it's brought in the right context in the eyes of society as a whole.
You can begin to see the way in which, sexuality has been ratcheted up in our society. And I think a really good example of this is Paris Hilton. But here was a woman who was, sort of moderately well known until, of course, her ex-boyfriend, who was 13 years older than her and married at the time.
Yes, and she brought up those two statements because it helps to bolster her opinion because
Did a sex tape of her and released it against her will onto the market. That year it became the best-selling porn sex tape of the year, and she was catapulted into enormous fame. Now,
yes, to everybody's regret, she has gotten a lot of fame and constantly irritates everybody around her.
let me say, she has kind of taken on this notion of being a slut. And again, I don't really think the word slut means anything outside of a society that polices women's sexuality.
Unlike you, who wants to police the whole world's sexuality and conform to your ideology.
But let's just use that word slut for the moment. She kind of wears the iconic slut label with pride. And let me tell you, she can, because her millions act as an upmarket cleansing cream, put that label on a working class girl, a girl of colour. And what we know from studies is that when girls are labelled sluts, they in fact have many symptoms very much like rape victims. They end up with high levels of alcohol and drug abuse, eating disorders, low self-esteem, depression, anxiety. In fact, when they get called a slut, it's a kind of collective rape of their identity. This is what you're...
And the whole point is to champion individual freedoms and to say that sexuality does not define the person individually. Unlike you, who just wants to censor everything and turn it into a Leave It to Beaver sort of 1950s style.
seeing. But young girls are being told that you have to look like that and dress like that in order to be visible in a society that if you can't compete with the low slung jeans and the tramp stamp and your thong sticking out of your jeans and your pierced belly button, if you don't do that, you are invisible. So
look, if you don't like how people are living their life, all you need to do is just buy a big wooden cross and nail yourself to it, because people will do stuff that you don't like because they are free to.
what do you want of a 14-year-old girl who is developmentally driven to be visible, So this is the problem that our young girls face, is they're trying to, wander through the culture, think, what does it mean to be a young woman? And what are the images on offer? Hypersexualization.
That isn't the only image around. I don't pay attention to images as of lately because, well, frankly, I don't give a fuck, but I'm fairly certain the parents could help them, teachers, social workers, other people around them could help them.
Absolutely. So some pro-pornography commentators talk about porn in the terms of empowerment, female sexuality, even ethical porn, I guess, which apparently seems to be more than about the sex.
I have no idea what that is.
Well, really, she wouldn't, because she's only interested in porn that helps to propagate her arguments. Because as we all know, the moment that her argument gets attacked slightly, it becomes null and void.
Well, yeah, what's your response to all
I have
these?
no idea what ethical
empowerment,
porn...
female sexuality, ethical porn.
Well, first of all, I'd like to know what they mean by ethical porn, right? Because I can't imagine such a thing. Because in a society where women are, sexually abused, where they're paid less than men, where they end up as the poor and the underfed, I want to...
In porn, women get paid roughly about twice as much as men for doing half the work. So I don't know what she's complaining about. In fact, the only way a man could even make twice as much as a woman is if he goes for gay porn, hence the term gay for pay.
know what it means to have ethical porn in that kind of society. But I mean, in terms of empowerment, you know, this is such a joke on women.
Trust me, the only joke on women is you.
That what we're told is you can't have economic power, you can't have full legal power, you can't have all of those things. But guess what? You know, you can strip, and that's your empowerment.
A big wooden cross. So every time you feel unappreciated for all your sacrifices, you can climb on up and nail yourself to it.
So really, it's a kind of pseudo form of empowerment that women are being offered. Because what I say is, if women want to be equal, we have to have equal representation at the World Bank, at the International Monetary Fund. Until women have full economic power over their lives, I don't want to hear about pornography being a form of sexual empowerment. It's ludicrous.
Almost as ludicrous as half the stuff that you say.
Does the loss of wider meaning, perhaps also some commitment to a spiritual belief system, does that, do you think, contribute to the acceptance of porn in society?
I actually come at this more from a feminist perspective, in the sense of what contributes to pornography is really a misogynist, patriarchal society.
Jesus Christ, it's endlessly with you feminists all about the patriarchy and how it keeps you all down and somehow offends you all the fucking time. For me, what causes pornography is a mixture of boredom and lust, and that's it.
A society where increasingly men have more power over women, and I also attribute it to capitalism.
Yes, because as we all know, capitalism is truly evil. I'd like to point out, capitalism built the TV or the computer that you're watching this on. Capitalism has built industry, it's helped fund jobs, keep people out of poverty. So her statement that capitalism is evil because she's a Marxist and thinks that we all should be picking berries for the proletarians is fucking stupid.
Because, you know, this is a capitalist industry. What pornography is a predatory capitalist industry. So I would argue more for that. What I would argue as well is that we live in a society where increasingly social and economic justice is not something that's really increasing in our lives. We're seeing more and more people suffer poverty, especially women and children. So I would say pornography grows out of a society based on inequality, based on misogyny, and based on patriarchy.
Now, everybody is open to criticise this following statement. I honestly don't believe in the patriarchy. I believe what creates pornography is a mixture of boredom and lust, and that's about it.
Okay. And your argument that porn has hijacked sexuality in your book implies that, you know, good sex and sexuality is absolutely vital to human flourishing. Can you tell us what your research tells us that good sex and sexuality is?
Trust me, if there's anybody who should know about good sexuality, it isn't Gail Dines. Trust me, she looks like last time she had it was probably about 25 million years ago.
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone can sit in a position and decide what's good sex for somebody else. I mean, what...
You fucking hypocrite. All you ever do is criticize other people for enjoying their sexuality as free and as open as possibly can. And now you say, oh, I don't know what good sexuality is. You're a fucking idiot and a hypocrite.
I argue in my book is that, you know, what we want is a sexuality that is authentic, that is based on people's experiences, on people's relationships, desires, wants, needs.
There is porn like that. The new romance series deals in exactly that sort of thing. But knowing her and her supporters, they say, oh, it's outside. Or it's not that popular. So guess what? It fucking exists and is regularly on the top 100 renters.
I can't and you can't decide what that looks like for other individuals. But
you, sir, are an idiot.
What we can say is that kind of sexuality is not going to come out of a predatory industry that is based on formulaic, generic, plasticized sexuality, which is what pornography is.
Pornography is a roughly about $14.5 billion industry. I think they can cater to every person's desires. You have a problem with capitalism because it's evil. I think you think it's evil.
So I'm arguing that it's hijacked a sexuality that we actually have a right to, which is our own sexuality defined on our own terms.
That's rich. You want it defined on your terms, not everybody else's. You'll be championing individualism then. You just champion proletarianism or Marxism.
Right, okay. And in your article you wrote the last line, there is no room for porn in a just society. So how do we get there, to a just society?
By not listening to Gail Dines for starters.
When you look at any movement that has been for social justice, it's basically based on the organisation of people deciding they've had enough of being oppressed. And I think that we need to start organising against the porn industry.
And I think you need to shut the fuck up.
I think we need to treat this as a public health emergency. We need to see this as something that we build a movement on. And I would say especially a movement spearheaded by parents.
You, sir, are an idiot.
Because, you know, we try to bring our children up in a society, and really this society is toxic.
Somebody is a scaremonger because society isn't toxic. I think it's alive and well.
And what does it mean to be a parent whose job it is to socialise your kid into a culture when the culture's toxic? And then, of course, when the toxic culture comes into your home and your kid acts it out, you get slapped as it's your fault. So parents are in an impossible situation. So I would like to see a movement spearheaded by parents, by public health experts, by anti-violence experts, by community organisers, which basically goes after the porn industry. That's what I would like to see.
Thank you.
And I'd like to see Angelina Jolie, Halle Berry, lesing up together. I think the likelihood of you seeing both of us as accomplishing our dreams are unfucking likely.
Thank you so much for speaking with us, Gail.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.